Did you know that Yoda had another lightsaber? A long, purple blade that he used to slay Imperial droids that pursued him while in exile in the swamps of Dagobah. What was this weapon? Why did he bring it with him in the aftermath of his failed duel against Sidious on the Senate floor? And was it stronger than his other dueling green blade, which he seemed to favor in combat against Count Dooku and Palpatine? We'll discover the answers to these questions and more in today's underrated moment. Yoda had chosen to hide on Dagobah for a reason. The world was far from the core where Palpatine ruled from his Imperial seat on Coruscant. In fact, the swamp-covered planet was in the Outer Rim, where the Hutts and their clans known to them as Kajadik held power in sector-spanning syndicates. But the Empire and its ever-expanding navy would stop at no end in their purge of the Jedi and their eradication of hidden rebel cells, even if it brought them to the fringes of known space. Sometime before the Battle of Hoth, an Imperial Star Destroyer lumbered out of hyperspace, along with 3 others of its fleet. They were canvassing the hundreds of habitable planets in the western reaches, and their slow-moving work had finally brought them to Dagobah. Soon, their direct superior, Darth Vader, would require a report on their findings, and the fleet commander wasn't eager to upset him. As he had done in every new system, the Admiral gave an order from the bridge, and an engineer at a control screen quickly pressed a series of buttons, unleashing a wave of Imperial droids. With a series of explosions, a line of panels on the underbelly of the lead Star Destroyer unraveled, and rocket-propelled droids soared to the planet below. One in particular burned through the upper atmosphere on Dagobah, charting a path directly for a bog on the outskirts of Yoda's small hovel. In an anticlimactic impact, the droid collided with the water, sending a small ripple into the exposed roots of the nearby trees. When the pond stilled, the top half of the spherical probe sheepishly stuck its head out of the water, swiveling its transparent lenses in all directions. It wouldn't be long until these same droids discovered the secret rebel base under the meter-thick snow of Hoth, and aided the Imperial skirt the rebels around the Ison trade corridor. But on this day, the red-eyed probe had bigger fish to fry. Following its simple protocols, the droid lifted itself out of the muck and hovered briefly over the planet's surface. After bobbing in the air for a few seconds, its red eye detected life forms in the distance, and the Imperial probe jettisoned off in search of any rebel sympathizers or preferably Jedi in hiding. Carefully threading in between the limbs and exposed roots of the planet's towering gnarled trees, it wasn't long before the probe caught the attention of creatures nearby. Perched on a nearby branch, a massive yellow-eyed Juba bird thought the probe droid might be easy prey. The avian was used to preying on smaller beasts, like the rat-sized quadrupeds that Yoda himself used to hunt. But today, the bird thought it would take its chances hunting an Imperial probe droid. That proved to be a fatal mistake. With a silent screech, the bird stealthily dove from the high canopy above the droid, digging its surprisingly sharp talons into the crevices that separated the probe's swiveling head from the bottom half of its body. But a simple, flying organism was no match for its full array of offensive weapons. In an automatic response, the probe fired a series of blaster rounds from a small turret beneath its light sensors, killing the Juba bird in a matter of seconds. And with another robotic gesture, the droid used its dangling metallic tendrils to shove the bird to the ground below, leaving its lightly roasted corpse behind for the dragon snakes to feast on. Unable to sense the excitement from surviving the encounter, the non-sentient droid simply bobbed once again, swiveled its head around, and departed in search of more life. Suddenly, in the distance, its sensors picked up on something. Narrowing its focus, the droid spotted a glowing light inside a hollowed-out gnarled tree, and then a tiny humanoid form, leaving the tiny hovel, holding a twig that had been fashioned into a walking stick. Yoda hardly looked like a Jedi Master, but the probe droid was programmed to hunt. But that didn't matter. This was an uncharted world, and the probe was compelled to follow Yoda until he found out exactly what this being was up to. Hovering in the distance, in an attempt to avoid detection, the probe droid followed Yoda for what seemed like hours. The tiny green being was obviously too old for such a long trek through the swamp, and if the probe droid had the ability to complain, like his distant relative C-3PO, then he would have whined about the hours wasted floating through the humid jungles of Dagobah. When it seemed like the droid had finally seen enough, his sensors picked up on something else interesting: Kyber radiation. As Yoda climbed up a narrow route, the probe droid noticed that a tiny cylinder was resting on a stone in the middle of the swamp. The Imperial machine used its anti-grav thrusters to push itself closer to the mysterious object, with computation speed that rivaled anything the rebellions had in their secret bunkers. The probe droid quickly scanned the dimensions of the cylinder and the nature of the radiation. It compared it to everything else in Imperial records. If it had enough time, the droid would have realized that this tiny mysterious device was actually an ancient Jedi weapon, a lightsaber. But, as luck would have it, time wasn't on the droid's side. With a wave of his hand, Yoda initiated the button on the side of the lightsaber's hilt and ignited a thick purple blade. With another yank, Yoda pulled the saber towards himself and sliced the probe droid cleanly in half in the process. Before it had a chance to transmit its full findings to the Imperial fleet above, the probe burst into electrical sparks and fell into the swamp waters below. Well aware that he had done enough to ensure his own survival, Yoda caught the purple lightsaber in his hand and deactivated. On the Imperial Star Destroyer above, a young petty officer picked up the strange transmission from the silent surface of Dagobah and relayed the findings to his superior. "Admiral, sir, I thought you should know we received a transmission from one of our probe droids in the Dagobah system. It was sent on a priority band and the droid was destroyed shortly thereafter." It was obvious by the tone of the eager sailor that he wanted to investigate exactly what happened on the surface of the planet below, but the Admiral was far too smart for such a risky operation. "Lighting nothing more," the Admiral said to his subordinate, as he quickly brushed aside the notion that he would have to devote more men and resources to such a miserable planet. "We're up for evaluation shortly, and I see no sense in upsetting Lord Vader with the news of another lost probe droid." With that, the Imperial fleet plotted its hyperspace route and warmed up its engines, preparing for a jump. Beneath them, on the surface of Dagobah, Yoda returned to his tiny home within the hollowed-out gnarl tree. But he brought a souvenir, one of the probe droid's limbs. The tiny Jedi Master laughed and hollered as he thought of how fun the rare visit had been. Even though he had to destroy the probe droid in the process, Yoda still enjoyed the company. Now, when we look at Yoda's purple lightsaber, it's hard to make too much sense of the weapon. While this story is definitely a legend's tale, and was even recorded before Yoda's green blade made its first appearance during the duel with Count Dooku in the Battle of Geonosis, there must be a historical reason that Yoda brought a purple blade to the planet. Perhaps after losing his own during the battle with Darth Sidious, Yoda quickly retrieved one from the Jedi Temple before escaping and winding up on Dagobah. Or perhaps the purple lightsaber was one of many weapons the ancient Jedi lost in the dark cave that haunted the planet. I suppose we may never know.